Welcome to Academic Gain Tutorials. In this video, we will look into the differences between verbal and nonverbal communication. Communication is a natural phenomenon. It is an act of interacting with people and sharing information with them. Do you know, whether you speak or not, it communicates the message to the other party? There are two types of communication: verbal and nonverbal. Verbal communication is a form of communication in which you use words to interchange the information with other people, either in the form of speech or writing. On the contrary, nonverbal communication does not use words for communicating anything, but some other modes are used, that is, where communication takes place by way of unspoken or unwritten messages such as body language, facial expressions, sign language, and so forth. So, let's look into the basic differences between verbal and nonverbal communication in a tabular form. Difference number 1. The communication in which the sender uses words to transmit the message to the receiver is known as verbal communication, whereas the communication that takes place between sender and receiver with the use of signs is known as nonverbal communication. Number 2. There are two types of verbal communication, formal and informal, whereas different types of nonverbal communication include chronemics, vocalics, haptics, kinesics, proxemics, and artifacts. Number 3. In verbal communication, the interchange of the message is very fast, which leads to rapid feedback. In opposition to this, the nonverbal communication is based more on understanding, which takes time, and hence it is comparatively slow. Number 4. There are very fewer chances of confusion in verbal communication between the sender and receiver in a verbal communication. Conversely, the chances of misunderstanding and confusion in nonverbal communication are very much, as the use of language is not done. Number 5. In verbal communication, the documentary evidence is maintained if the communication is formal or written, but there is no conclusive evidence in case of nonverbal communication. Number 6. Advantage of verbal communication is that the message can be clearly understood and immediate feedback is possible, whereas nonverbal communication is helpful in understanding emotions, status, lifestyle, and feelings of the sender. And difference number 7. In verbal communication, the presence of both the parties at the place of communication is not necessary, as it can also be done if the parties are at different locations. On the other hand, for an effective nonverbal communication, both the parties must be there at the time of communication. Verbal and nonverbal communication are not contradictory to each other, but they are complementary. In short, both goes side by side and helps a human being to interact and respond to other human beings. Verbal communication is obviously an important part of life, as we use words to communicate. But have you ever thought that a small baby cannot use language or words to speak, but he chooses signs to show his anger, happiness, and sorrow? Similarly, deaf and dumb persons also use sign language for communicating with other people. So, this is the significance of nonverbal communication in many lives.